So should you trade up in the NFL? And really what I want to talk about here is, should you trade up for like a top 12 pick? That seems to be that's the cutoff I went with here, as I just kind of want to talk about the strategy there, and does it tend to work out? So what I'm going to do is look at every single trade up of the past 5 years where a team traded up to get into the top 12 to draft a player. That's the way we're going to go with it, and I'll just get into it, and you can kind of see how this video works as we go along. So the most recent one we have was the Chris Olave trade up, although technically I guess the most recent one would be the Jameson Williams, but again, in the most recent draft, we saw 2 trade ups into the top 12. The Saints traded up to get Chris Olave at pick 11. So the picks you see at the bottom, those are, or the players you see at the bottom, excuse me, those are the players that either Washington got, or in Braden Smith's situation, they traded that pick to Carolina, so Braden Smith. So those are the 3 picks they got, and the players they ended up being are Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson, and Braden Smith. So let's just say my opinion on who I think won each of these trades. This one, I think you could argue either one. I think Dotson and Olave were both very good, and I think the addition of Robinson, you could argue that Washington won, or you could argue that Olave won. So this is a maybe for me, but I think Olave was a little bit better than Dotson year one, and I don't value running backs as much as others do. So I'll go Chris Olave in the Saints one, but it's very close. You could argue either way. The other one, so the Lions traded up to pick 12 to get Jameson Williams. They also got a pick back in that trade, which they used on Josh Pascal, who was, I thought, solid for them last year. Williams, showed a couple of flashes, but really was banged up, and, we didn't really just get to see much from him. So I would say this one is a to be determined. However, one of the picks they gave up ended up being used on Christian Watson, who was good last year, and I think certainly probably I would say the most valuable piece of this deal. Also Lewis Seen, who we didn't get to see last year, unfortunately, is another to be determined here. But to me, I would definitely put this as it's a loss for the Lions, at least in terms of year one. But again, if Williams is awesome next year, then it changes. So it's a to be determined, but if I have to say one, I will say loss. Next, we have Trey Lance. This is the one trade we have which still has a future pick on the board, but what happened here was, the San Francisco 49ers used 3 first-round picks to get Trey Lance. They gave, first pick of that year that they gave up ended up being Micah Parsons. They also traded, a pick that ended up being Cole Strange. So again, maybe they wouldn't have drafted Cole Strange, but that's where the pick was. Also, Matt Corral was, that was a pick in there. And then they still have a first-round pick that has yet to be selected, but the Dolphins traded out for Bradley Chubb. So you could argue that Micah Parsons and Bradley Chubb could have been available for San Francisco if they did not trade away Trey Lance. Not exactly how it works because of the contract with Chubb and all that. But still, I think you look at this, and again, it's to be determined. If Lance is awesome, then the Niners won't care. But as of right now, I'm sure they would love to have Micah Parsons. Next, we have another Micah Parsons spotting as, again, the Dolphins, while they traded back, they then traded back up with Philadelphia to select, get the number 6 overall pick that they used to select Jaylen Waddle. So again, the number 12 pick getting passed around a couple times. Micah Parsons, once again, a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Waddle, incredible in his own right. Also, another first-round pick was here used on Kenyon Green, who, is not very good, at least hasn't been for his first year for Houston. A couple other pieces involved, but, I would give this as a loss here by Miami. As much as I like Waddle, I do think Parsons is the better player, but you could argue either one, I think. We then have the Justin Fields trade with the Giants, which as of right now, to me, is a clear win for the Bears. Now, Kadarius Toney has not lived up to the hype so far, although he has actually played well when he's been healthy. He's just rarely been healthy. Jamar Johnson was kind of a hyped-up player that hasn't lived up to the hype for Denver, was a 5th-round pick. Evan Neal also had he had a bad rookie year, and then Daniel Bellinger actually played pretty well. But the reality is, so far, Toney and Neal have just not played well for the Giants, so that makes it a no-brainer. But even if they had, getting a quarterback that has sky-high potential with Fields is still probably a win either way. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers traded up for Devin Bush, who has not been great for them. A couple of solid tight ends, Noah Fant and Drew Sample, along with Lloyd Cushenberry, the center for the Broncos. This one isn't a massive win either way, but I would put it as a win for Denver, so a loss for Pittsburgh, the team that traded up. Next up, we have, quite frankly, just a terrible trade up here by the Jets. Again, if Sam Darnold worked and he was awesome, okay, well then you don't feel bad about it. But they trade up for Sam Darnold. The Colts trade down. They get Quentin Nelson with that pick. They also get Braden Smith, a really good offensive lineman. Dallas Goedert was a pick selected with the trade. They go to Philly. But still, the Goddard, very good player. And Rocky Sin, who's been a solid corner. So had the Jets just stayed pat and drafted all the players that the Colts drafted, they would have 4 good starters on their roster. Again, you trade 4 starters for a good quarterback. It didn't work out this time. Next up, we have the Josh Allen trade. Yes, if you remember, Josh Allen was a trade up. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers traded down in this one. They had the 7th overall pick. Josh Allen was selected then. And the Buccaneers, again, got some solid players out of it. Vita Vea, I think they feel, happy that they have him and was a key piece of their Super Bowl run. Also, MJ Stewart has been a player. He was a player for them and was a player for the Browns, not a star or anything. But as a whole, again, this is a no-brainer that this was a win because you got a superstar quarterback. Again, I think for the Buccaneers who weren't trying to get a quarterback, they felt fine about this trade at the time, but obviously, looking at it now, this is a clear win for Buffalo. Finally, last but not least, the Cardinals traded with the Raiders. They traded to get the number 10th overall pick to select Josh Rosen. The players they gave up, Colton Miller is the key one here, as Colton Miller has been a really good left tackle for the Raiders, whereas Josh Rosen was literally given up on after 1 year. So kind of a no-brainer. This was a loss as well. So, while these haven't all been losses, and this is a small sample size, in the past 9 trade ups that we've seen, these are the results. These are the trade ups that worked. I think you could argue Chris Olave worked, and then the other 2 are Justin Fields and Josh Allen. Now again, maybe the Jameson Williams trade up will work and maybe they'll feel better about it. But I do think this example kind of does go to show, I think going through this, this is why, people always say you want to trade down, you don't want to trade up. But looking at it, you can kind of see why that's the case. And again, a couple of the ones that feel like, well, that could have worked out, were still quarterback ones, right? Like Sam Darnold, as heavy as the haul that the Colts got for that trade was, still, if Sam Darnold hit, they would have felt great about it. They being the Jets, of course. And same thing with the Trey Lance thing. Even though you're giving up, a pick that was traded for Bradley Chubb and a defensive player of the year candidate, if Trey Lance is awesome next year, the 49ers do not feel bad about their situation whatsoever. So what does this tell us? To me, it's kind of the opposite. Trading up for a non-quarterback, probably not a good idea. Because again, a lot of times when you give up this stuff, it's rare that that value ends up being worse than what like a great player would be. And also, no matter how much you love the 7th overall player or whoever it ends up being, the 5th best non-quarterback available, they rarely end up being as good as you think they're going to be. And even when they do, like a Jaylen Waddle, a lot of times you can still get good players later on. And you saw that with the even a heavily criticized trade down with the Vikings, who traded pretty far down and people felt like they didn't get enough value. They still did get Christian Watson's, at least the pick selected for him, but then they traded down and didn't actually end up getting him. But still, that one still feels like a win in hindsight, which is, again, just kind of an interesting exercise more than anything. Small sample size. You'd have to use a bigger sample size to get a great idea on it. Maybe I'll do another 5 years at a certain point. But for now, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.